Anthropology is the study of humanity. Its main subdivisions are social and cultural anthropology, which describes the workings of societies around the world; linguistic anthropology, which investigates the influence of language in social life; and biological or physical anthropology, which concerns long-term development of the human organism. Archaeology, which studies past human cultures through investigation of physical evidence, is thought of as a branch of anthropology in the United States, although in Europe, it is viewed as a discipline in its own right, or grouped under related disciplines such as history. Origin and development of the term. The abstract noun anthropology is first attested in reference to history. Its present use first appeared in Renaissance Germany in the works of Magnus Hunt and Otto Kasman. Their New Latin anthropologia derived from the combining forms of the Greek words anthropos and logos. It began to be used in English, possibly via French anthropologie, by the early 18th century. Through the 19th century in 1647, the Bartholins, founders of the University of Copenhagen, defined anthropology as follows. Anthropology, that is to say the science that treats of man, is divided ordinarily and with reason into anatomy, which considers the body and the parts, and psychology, which speaks of the soul. Sporadic use of the term for some of the subject matter occurred subsequently, such as the use by Etienne Serres in 1838 to describe the natural history, or paleontology, of man, based on comparative anatomy, and the creation of a chair in anthropology and ethnography in 1850 at the National Museum of Natural History by Jean-Louis Armand de Quatrefages Bray. Various short-lived organizations of anthropologists had already been formed. The Société Ethnologique de Paris, the first to use ethnology, was formed in 1839. Its members were primarily anti-slavery activists. When slavery was abolished in France in 1848, the Société was abandoned. Meanwhile, the Ethnological Society of New York, currently the American Ethnological Society, was founded on its model in 1842, as well as the Ethnological Society of London in 1843, a breakaway group of the Aborigines Protection Society. These anthropologists of the times were liberal, anti-slavery, and pro-human rights activists. They maintained international connections. Anthropology and many other current fields are the intellectual results of the comparative methods developed in the earlier 19th century. Theorists in such diverse fields as anatomy, linguistics, and ethnology, making feature-by-feature comparisons of their subject matters, were beginning to suspect that similarities between animals, languages, and folkways were the result of processes or laws unknown to them then. For them, the publication of Charles Darwin's On the Origin of Species was the epiphany of everything they had begun to suspect. Darwin himself arrived at his conclusions through comparison of species he had seen in agronomy and in the wild. Darwin and Wallace unveiled evolution in the late 1850s. There was an immediate rush to bring it into the social sciences. Paul Broca in Paris was in the process of breaking away from the Société de Biologie to form the first of the explicitly anthropological societies, the Société d'Anthropologie de Paris, meeting for the first time in Paris in 1859. When he read Darwin, he became an immediate convert to transformism, as the French called evolutionism. His definition now became, the study of the human group, considered as a whole, in its details, and in relation to the rest of nature. Broca, being what today would be called a neurosurgeon, had taken an interest in the pathology of speech. He wanted to localize the difference between man and the other animals, which appeared to reside in speech. He discovered the speech center of the human brain, today called Broca's area after him. His interest was mainly in biological anthropology, but a German philosopher specializing in psychology, Theodor Waitz, took up the theme of general and social anthropology in his 6-volume work, entitled Die Anthropologie der Naturvölker, 1859–1864. The title was soon translated as The Anthropology of Primitive Peoples. The last two volumes were published posthumously. Waits defined anthropology as the science of the nature of man. By nature, he meant matter animated by the divine breath, i.e., he was an animist. Following Broca's lead, Waits points out that anthropology is a new field, which would gather material from other fields, but would differ from them in the use of comparative anatomy, physiology, and psychology to differentiate man from the animals nearest to him. He stresses that the data of comparison must be empirical, gathered by experimentation. The history of civilization as well as ethnology are to be brought into the comparison. It is to be presumed fundamentally that the species, man, is a unity, and that the same laws are thought are applicable to all men. Waits was influential among the British ethnologists. In 1863, the explorer Richard Francis Burton and the speech therapist James Hunt broke away from the Ethnological Society of London to form the Anthropological Society of London, which henceforward would follow the path of the new anthropology rather than just ethnology. It was the second society dedicated to general anthropology in existence. Representatives from the French Société were present, though not Broca. In his keynote address, printed in the first volume of its new publication, The Anthropological Review, Hunt stressed the work of Waits, adopting his definitions as a standard. Among the first associates were the young Edward Burnett Tyler, inventor of cultural anthropology, and his brother Alfred Tyler, a geologist. Previously, Edward had referred to himself as an ethnologist, subsequently, an anthropologist. Similar organizations in other countries followed. The American Anthropological Association in 1902, the Anthropological Society of Madrid, the Anthropological Society of Vienna, the Italian Society of Anthropology and Ethnology, and many others subsequently. The majority of these were evolutionist. One notable exception was the Berlin Society of Anthropology, founded by Rudolf Virchow, known for his vituperative attacks on the evolutionists. Not religious himself, he insisted that Darwin's conclusions lacked empirical foundation. During the last 3 decades of the 19th century, a proliferation of anthropological societies and associations occurred, most independent, most publishing their own journals, and all international in membership and association. The major theorists belonged to these organizations. They supported the gradual osmosis of anthropology curricula into the major institutions of higher learning. By 1898, the American Association for the Advancement of Science was able to report that 48 educational institutions in 13 countries had some curriculum in anthropology. None of the 75 faculty members were under a department named anthropology. 20th and 21st centuries. This meager statistic expanded in the 20th century to comprise anthropology departments in the majority of the world's higher educational institutions, many thousands in number. Anthropology has diversified from a few major subdivisions to dozens more. Practical anthropology, the use of anthropological knowledge and technique to solve specific problems, has arrived. For example, the presence of buried victims might stimulate the use of a forensic archaeologist to recreate the final scene. Organization has reached global level. For example, the World Council of Anthropological Associations, a network of national, regional and international associations that aims to promote worldwide communication and cooperation in anthropology, currently contains members from about 36 nations. Since the work of Franz Boas and Bronislaw Malinowski in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, social anthropology in Great Britain and cultural anthropology in the US have been distinguished from other social sciences by its emphasis on cross-cultural comparisons. Cultural anthropology in particular has emphasized cultural relativism, holism, and the use of findings to frame cultural critiques. This has been particularly prominent in the United States, from both arguments against 19th-century racial ideology, through Margaret Mead's advocacy for gender equality and sexual liberation, to current criticisms of post-colonial oppression and promotion of multiculturalism. Ethnography is one of its primary research designs, as well as the text that is generated from anthropological field work. In Great Britain and the Commonwealth countries, the British tradition of social anthropology tends to dominate. In the United States, anthropology has traditionally been divided into the four-field approach developed by Franz Boas in the early 20th century: biological or physical anthropology, social, cultural, or socio-cultural anthropology, and archaeology, plus anthropological linguistics. These fields frequently overlap, but tend to use different methodologies and techniques. European countries with overseas colonies tended to practice more ethnology. In non-colonial European countries, social anthropology is now defined as the study of social organization in non-state societies. It is sometimes referred to as socio-cultural anthropology in the parts of the world that were influenced by the European tradition. Fields. Anthropology is a global discipline where humanities, social, and natural sciences are forced to confront one another. Anthropology builds upon knowledge from natural sciences, including the discoveries about the origin and evolution of Homo sapiens, human physical traits, human behavior, the variations among different groups of humans, how the evolutionary past of Homo sapiens has influenced its social organization and culture, and from social sciences, including the organization of human social and cultural relations, institutions, social conflicts, etc. Early anthropology originated in classical Greece and Persia and studied and tried to understand observable cultural diversity. As such, anthropology has been central in the development of several new interdisciplinary fields such as cognitive science, global studies, and various ethnic studies. According to Clifford Geertz, anthropology is perhaps the last of the great 19th-century conglomerate disciplines still for the most part organizationally intact. Long after natural history, moral philosophy, philology, and political economy have dissolved into their specialized successors, it has remained a diffuse assemblage of ethnology, human biology, comparative linguistics, and prehistory, held together mainly by the vested interests, sunk costs, and administrative habits of academia, and by a romantic image of comprehensive scholarship. Socio-cultural anthropology has been heavily influenced by structuralist and postmodern theories, as well as a shift toward the analysis of modern societies. During the 1970s and 1990s, there was an epistemological shift away from the positivist traditions that had largely informed the discipline. During this shift, enduring questions about the nature and production of knowledge came to occupy a central place in cultural and social anthropology. In contrast, archaeology and biological anthropology remained largely positivist. Due to this difference in epistemology, the four subfields of anthropology have lacked cohesion over the last several decades. Socio-cultural anthropology draws together the principal axes of cultural anthropology and social anthropology. Cultural anthropology is the comparative study of the manifold ways in which people make sense of the world around them, while social anthropology is the study of the relationships among persons and groups. Cultural anthropology is more related to philosophy, literature, and the arts, while social anthropology is more related to sociology and history, in that it helps develop understanding of social structures, typically of others and other populations. There is no hard and fast distinction between them, and these categories overlap to a considerable degree. Enquiry in socio-cultural anthropology is guided in part by cultural relativism, the attempt to understand other societies in terms of their own cultural symbols and values. Accepting other cultures in their own terms moderates reductionism in cross-cultural comparison. This project is often accommodated in the field of ethnography. Ethnography can refer to both a methodology and the product of ethnographic research, i.e., an ethnographic monograph. As methodology, ethnography is based upon long-term fieldwork within a community or other research site. Participant observation is one of the foundational methods of social and cultural anthropology. Ethnology involves the systematic comparison of different cultures. The process of participant observation can be especially helpful to understanding a culture from an EMIC point of view. The study of kinship in social organization is a central focus of socio-cultural anthropology, as kinship is a human universal. Socio-cultural anthropology also covers economic and political organization, law and conflict resolution, patterns of consumption and exchange, material culture, technology, infrastructure, gender relations, ethnicity, child rearing and socialization, religion, myth, symbols, values, etiquette, worldview, sports, music, nutrition, recreation, games, food, festivals, and language. Comparison across cultures is a key element of method in socio-cultural anthropology, including the industrialized West. Cultures in the standard cross-cultural sample of world societies are biological anthropology and physical anthropology are synonymous terms to describe anthropological research focused on the study of humans and non-human primates in the biological, evolutionary, and demographic dimensions. It examines the biological and social factors that have affected the evolution of humans and other primates, and that generate, maintain or change contemporary genetic and physiological variation. Archaeological archaeology is the study of the human past through its material remains. Artifacts, faunal remains, and human-altered landscapes are evidence of the cultural and material lives of past societies. Archaeologists examine these material remains in order to deduce patterns of past human behavior and cultural practices. Ethno Archaeology is a type of archaeology that studies the practices and material remains of living human groups in order to gain a better understanding of the evidence left behind by past human groups, who are presumed to have lived in similar ways. Linguistic anthropology seeks to understand the processes of human communications, verbal and non-verbal, variation in language across time and space, the social uses of language, and the relationship between language and culture. It is the branch of anthropology that brings linguistic methods to bear on anthropological problems, linking the analysis of linguistic forms and processes to the interpretation of socio-cultural processes. Linguistic anthropologists often draw on related fields including sociolinguistics, pragmatics, cognitive linguistics, semiotics, discourse analysis, and narrative analysis.